She pounded her feces and used it as foundation and powder for her clients. In the bustling heart of Lagos, Nigeria, where dreams were built on the foundations of hustle and ambition, there stood a small makeup studio that would become the center of a nightmare no one could have imagined. The studio belonged to Ada, a 32-year-old woman whose passion for makeup artistry had been her lifelong dream, but whose desperation would lead her down a path so dark that it would haunt an entire community for years to come. Ada had always been fascinated by the transformative power of makeup. As a young girl growing up in Enugu, she would watch her mother prepare for church services, carefully applying powder and lipstick with the precision of an artist working on a masterpiece. Those moments had planted a seed in Ada's heart, a seed that grew into an all-consuming desire to make women feel beautiful, to see their faces light up when they looked in the mirror and saw the best versions of themselves staring back. After years of saving money from her job as a sales clerk in a clothing boutique, Ada had finally gathered enough capital to open her own makeup studio. She had rented a small shop on Allen Avenue in Ikeja, a location she believed would bring her success. The street was known for its beauty salons and fashion boutiques, places where women with money and taste came to pamper themselves. Ada had invested everything she had into her business. She purchased the finest makeup products she could afford, importing brands from Europe and America. She bought professional lighting, comfortable chairs, large vanity mirrors with bulbs around their frames, and even commissioned a beautiful sign that read Kyoma's Glam Studio in elegant gold lettering named after her mother. The opening day had been filled with hope and excitement. Ada had stood at the entrance of her shop in her crisp white uniform, her own face perfectly made up, ready to welcome the flood of customers she was certain would come. But as the hours passed, only a handful of curious passers-by stopped to glance inside. By the end of the first week, she had serviced only 3 clients, and the money they paid barely covered her daily expenses. Across the street, directly opposite her shop, stood the establishment that would become her obsession and her torment. Beauty by Ngozi was a thriving makeup studio owned by Ngozi Okafor, a woman in her late 40s who had been in the business for over 15 years. Ngozi's shop was always packed with clients. Women lined up outside her door, willing to wait hours for her services. Her Instagram page boasted over 200,000 followers, and she was regularly featured in bridal magazines and fashion blogs. Ada would watch from her empty shop as Ngozi's assistants hurried back and forth, as brides in their white robes waited their turn, as bridesmaids laughed and chatted while getting their faces done. The contrast was crushing. Ada had the skills, she was certain of it. She had trained at a reputable makeup academy in Lekki, had practiced on countless faces, and had a natural eye for color and contouring. But none of that mattered when no one walked through her door. She tried everything she could think of to attract customers. She printed flyers and distributed them around the neighborhood. She offered discounts, sometimes reducing her prices so low that she barely made a profit. She created an Instagram page and posted pictures of the few clients she had serviced, using every hashtag she could think of to gain visibility. Nothing worked. As the months passed, Ada's savings dwindled rapidly. The rent on the shop was due every month, and her landlord was not a patient man. The suppliers who had sold her makeup products on credit began calling her, demanding payment. Her own rent at the single room she occupied in Ogba was overdue. She survived on 1 meal a day, usually a small portion of rice or gari, and spent her days sitting in her beautiful, empty shop, watching as Ngozi's business flourished while hers withered. The breaking point came on a particularly difficult evening. Ada had received a stern warning from her shop landlord that if she did not pay the 3 months' rent she owed within 2 weeks, he would lock up her shop and seize all her equipment. That same day, her supplier had sent his assistant to her shop to collect payment or repossess the products she had bought on credit. She had begged for more time, promising she would pay soon, but she could see the doubt in their eyes. As she locked up her shop that evening and walked the lonely streets back to her room, tears streamed down her face. She had failed. All her dreams, all her sacrifices, all the money she had borrowed from friends and family, everything had been for nothing. That night, lying on her thin mattress in her cramped room, Ada made a decision that would change her life forever. She would seek help from the spiritual realm. She had heard whispers about such things before, stories of people who had consulted powerful spiritualists when conventional means failed them. She had always dismissed such talk as superstition, but desperation has a way of making the unthinkable appear as the only option left. Through a friend of a friend, Ada learned about a voodoo priest who lived in a remote area on the outskirts of Lagos, near Badagry. His name was Baba Augun, and he was said to be powerful beyond measure, capable of changing destinies and bending fate to his will. The journey to find him took Ada through narrow, unpaved roads, past fishing villages and dense vegetation, until she arrived at a compound surrounded by tall palm trees and ancient-looking sculptures. Baba Augun was a small man with grey dreadlocks and eyes that seemed to look through a person rather than at them. His compound smelled of incense and herbs, and the walls of his consultation room were covered with mysterious symbols and dried animal skins. When Ada explained her situation, Baba Augun listened in silence, occasionally nodding his head. When she finished, he sat back in his chair and studied her for a long moment before speaking. He told her that he could indeed make her the most sought-after makeup artist in Nigeria. Her shop would overflow with clients, and her name would be mentioned among the elite. Money would flow to her like a river after heavy rains. But such power came with a price, and it was not a monetary price. He explained the ritual she would need to perform each morning, a ritual so grotesque that Ada felt her stomach turn as he described it. She would need to use her own feces as the base for her foundation and powder. Each morning, she would collect her first bowel movement, divide it into 2 portions, mash one thoroughly for foundation, and dry the other in the sun before grinding it into a fine powder. He would provide her with a special potion that would eliminate any odor and give the mixture a pleasant fragrance that would make her clients believe they were experiencing luxury products. Ada had felt revulsion rise in her throat as Baba Augun explained the process. This was beyond anything she had imagined. This was not just spiritually questionable, it was physically repulsive, morally reprehensible. But as she sat in that dimly lit room, thinking about her mounting debts, her empty shop, her failed dreams, something inside her shifted. She thought about Ngozi across the street, thriving while she suffered. She thought about the landlord who would soon throw her out. She thought about returning to her village in shame, admitting to her family that she had failed. In that moment, Ada convinced herself that she could do this. She would do whatever it took to succeed, and once she was established, once she had money and fame, she could find a way to break free from the ritual. She agreed to Baba Augun's terms. He gave her a small bottle containing a dark, viscous liquid that shimmered strangely in the light. He instructed her on the exact process she needed to follow, warned her never to miss a single day, and sent her on her way with a knowing smile that would haunt her dreams in the months to come. The first morning of the ritual was the hardest thing Ada had ever done. Standing in her small bathroom, staring at what she had to work with, she nearly backed out. Her hands shook as she followed Baba Augun's instructions, dividing and processing the material, adding the potion he had given her. The transformation was startling. The foul substance became odorless, then began to emit a subtle, pleasant scent reminiscent of expensive perfume. The texture changed too, becoming smooth and creamy for the foundation, fine and silky for the powder. If Ada had not known what she was working with, she would have believed these were premium products from a high-end brand. She stored the preparations in clean containers, trying not to think about their origin, and opened her shop that afternoon. 4 hours, nothing changed. The street remained busy, but no one entered her shop. Then, around 3 in the afternoon, a woman in her mid-30s walked in. Her name was Amaka, and she was attending a wedding that evening, but her regular makeup artist had cancelled on her at the last minute. She was desperate and willing to try someone new. Ada's hands trembled slightly as she began to work, applying the cursed foundation to Amaka's face. But as she worked, she noticed something remarkable. The foundation went on more smoothly than any product she had ever used. It seemed to melt into the skin, creating a flawless finish that looked completely natural yet perfected every feature. The powder set everything beautifully, giving Amaka's skin an ethereal glow that photographs could never quite capture. When Ada finished and turned Amaka toward the mirror, the woman gasped audibly. Amaka could not believe what she saw. Her skin looked poreless, radiant, as if she had been photoshopped in real life. The makeup had somehow made her features more harmonious, more beautiful than she had ever seen them. She took out her phone and immediately began calling friends, raving about the makeup artist she had discovered. Before leaving, she booked Ada for her own upcoming birthday party and promised to send all her friends. That evening, Ada closed her shop with a mixture of elation and deep unease. The magic had worked, but at what cost? She tried not to think about it, focusing instead on the fact that she finally had a satisfied client who would spread the word about her services. The transformation of Ada's business was nothing short of miraculous. Within days, word spread through Lagos's social circles about the makeup artist who could make anyone look like a goddess. The weekend brought her first real test. It was an Owambi, a traditional Yoruba party known for its grandeur and extravagance, and the hostess had somehow heard about Ada. When Ada arrived at her shop that Saturday morning, she found a crowd of over 30 women waiting outside, all of them scheduled to have their makeup done for the same event. That day became a blur of activity. Ada worked from dawn until mid-afternoon, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, applying the cursed products to face after face. Each woman who looked in the mirror had the same reaction of shock and delight. They looked impossibly beautiful, their features enhanced in ways that seemed to defy the normal limits of makeup artistry. Some women cried with joy, others took endless selfies, all of them promised to return and to tell everyone they knew about Kyoma's glam studio. By the end of that day, Ada had made over 1 million naira in fees and tips, more money than she had earned in all her previous months in business combined. The women left her shop looking like queens, ready to turn heads at the Owambi. As Ada counted her earnings that evening, she felt a surge of triumph. She had done it. She had beaten Ngozi, beaten the odds, beaten her circumstances. She pushed away the small voice in her head that whispered about the price she was paying each morning. The success continued and accelerated. Ada's Instagram page exploded with followers. Celebrities began booking her services. Brides traveled from other states to have her do their wedding makeup. Fashion magazines featured her work. She renovated her shop, expanding it to include 3 makeup stations instead of 1, hiring assistants to help manage the flood of bookings. She paid off all her debts within 2 months and moved from her small room in Ogba to a nice apartment in Lekki. She bought expensive clothes, ate at fancy restaurants, and finally felt like she had arrived. But across the street, Ngozi watched Ada's sudden rise with suspicion. How had this struggling newcomer suddenly become the most popular makeup artist in Lagos? Ngozi had been in the business long enough to know that success did not usually come so quickly or so completely. She began to observe Ada more carefully, noticing strange things. She saw Ada arriving at her shop early each morning with a small cooler, saw her locking herself in the back room for an extended period before starting work. She noticed that Ada never let anyone touch her makeup products, keeping them locked away when not in use, always applying everything herself even though she had assistants for other tasks. Then one day, Ada and her boyfriend had a fight which resulted in a breakup. Ada had been dating Felix for 2 years, so she was devastated by the breakup. That night, she drowned herself in alcohol while blasting heartbreak songs loudly. She was wasted and slept that night. The next morning, she was still very tipsy, so she ran to the toilet due to a runny stomach, forgetting that she always had to use her first feces of the day to perform the ritual. It wasn't until after she flushed the toilet that she realized the mistake she just made. Her first instinct was to rush into the soakaway to get her shit back, but she couldn't. She went about her day in fear of what would happen, but she tried really hard not to show yut. She wasn't just battling a fresh breakup with the man she genuinely loved, she also battled the fear of the unknown because Baba Augun didn't tell her exactly what would happen if she missed a day, but he warned her it was dangerous. So, she decided to watch things play out. When nothing happened, she assumed all was good. Meanwhile, something sinister was beginning to happen to the women who had been Ada's clients. It started subtly, about 6 weeks after that first successful Saturday. Amaka, Ada's first client under the new ritual, noticed a small rash on her cheek. She dismissed it as a reaction to something she had eaten, but the rash did not go away. Instead, it slowly spread, small red patches appearing across her face. She tried different creams and medications, but nothing helped. Then, about 3 months after her makeup session with Ada, Amaka noticed something that made her scream in horror. Tiny movements under her skin, barely visible but definitely there. When she examined her face more closely in strong light, She saw them, minuscule white larvae, moving beneath the surface of her skin. Amaka was not alone in her suffering. All across Lagos, women who had been Ada's clients began experiencing similar symptoms. It started with rashes and itching, progressed to skin discoloration, and eventually manifested as visible decay. Their skin began to develop dark patches that spread like oil stains. The texture changed, becoming rough and uneven. And then came the maggots, tiny white larvae that emerged from pores, that moved visibly beneath the skin's surface, that left small holes as they burrowed. The women suffered in silence at first, each one believing she was the only one afflicted, too ashamed to speak publicly about something so grotesque. They visited dermatologists who were baffled by their condition. Medical tests came back with confusing results. Doctors prescribed antibiotics, antifungals, antiparasitics, but nothing worked. The decay continued, slowly but relentlessly transforming their faces from beautiful to horrifying. It was Amaka who finally broke the silence. Desperate and watching her face deteriorate day by day, she made a bold decision to post about her condition on Instagram. She uploaded close-up photos of her face, showing the decay, the discoloration, the evidence of larvae moving beneath her skin. Her caption was simple but powerful. She explained that she had no idea what was causing her condition, that doctors could not help her, and that she was reaching out to see if anyone else had experienced something similar. She mentioned that the problems had started not long after she had gotten her makeup done at a studio in Ikeja, though she did not initially name Ada's shop specifically. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, dozens of women commented on her post, sharing that they were experiencing identical symptoms. The comment section became a confessional, a place where women who had suffered in isolated shame suddenly realized they were part of a larger pattern. They began comparing notes, looking for common factors, and the connection quickly became clear. Every single woman who reported these symptoms had gotten their makeup done at Kayoma's glam studio. Some had been there once, others multiple times, but all of them had sat in Ada's chair and had her products applied to their faces. The social media storm that followed was devastating. Within 24 hours, Ada's shop went from being the most sought-after makeup studio in Lagos to being the subject of a scandal that dominated conversations across the city. Women began sharing their stories on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Hashtags like #Kayoma's Glam Studio Exposed and #Toxic Makeup began trending. Local news outlets picked up the story, running segments about the mysterious skin condition affecting dozens of women. The photos were horrifying, before and after comparisons that showed vibrant, beautiful women transformed into victims of what looked like some flesh-eating disease. Ada watched her world collapse in real time. The bookings stopped instantly. Her phone, which had been constantly ringing with appointment requests, fell silent. Her Instagram page, which had been filled with compliments and praise, became a battlefield of angry comments and accusations. Women who had once called her a genius now called her a monster. Those who had tagged her in grateful posts deleted them or replaced them with warnings to stay away from her shop. In a panic, Ada tried to deny everything. She posted statements claiming that she had no idea what was causing these women's problems, suggesting that they might have used contaminated products at home, or that they might have pre-existing skin conditions. She claimed that her products were imported from Europe, that everything was safe and tested. But her denials only made things worse, making her appear callous and dishonest in the face of overwhelming evidence. The authorities soon became involved. The National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, announced that they would be investigating Kayoma's glam studio. Health inspectors arrived at her shop with a warrant to seize her products for testing. Kayoma felt a cold terror wash over her as she watched them bag up her foundations, powders, and brushes, knowing that any laboratory analysis would reveal the horrifying truth about what she had been applying to women's faces. She tried to run. Late one night, Ada packed a bag and prepared to flee Lagos, planning to disappear into another state or perhaps leave Nigeria entirely. But the scandal had grown too large, her face too recognizable. When she arrived at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport, airport security recognized her from the news and detained her for questioning. The laboratory results came back within a week, and they were far worse than even the most sensational rumors had suggested. The analysis revealed that Ada's foundation and powder contained extremely high levels of fecal coliform bacteria, including E. coli, as well as parasites in various stages of development. The products also contained traces of the mysterious potion that Baba Augun had provided, a mixture that toxicologists identified as containing dangerous compounds that had temporarily masked the biological activity in the feces while also creating an environment that encouraged parasitic growth beneath the skin's surface. The medical community finally understood what had happened. The women who had used Ada's services had essentially had human waste applied directly to their faces. The potion had prevented them from smelling or immediately recognizing what was happening, allowing the contamination to penetrate their pores. Once absorbed, the bacteria and parasitic eggs had begun to colonize the skin tissue, creating infections that caused the decay and the emergence of larvae. The condition was unlike anything dermatologists had encountered before because it combined bacterial infection with parasitic infestation, all derived from a source that no medical professional would have thought to test for. The arrest came swiftly. Police officers appeared at Ada's apartment in Lekki and took her into custody. She was charged with multiple counts of aggravated assault, endangering public health, fraud, and running an unsanitary business. The prosecutor described her actions as acts of mass poisoning, noting that over 70 women had come forward with documented cases of the facial decay, and there were likely many more who had not yet reported their symptoms. In her cell, awaiting trial, Ada finally broke down completely. She confessed everything to her lawyer, who listened in stunned horror as she described her visits to Baba Augun, the ritual she had performed each morning, the desperate desire for success that had led her to cross an unthinkable line. Her lawyer, a seasoned professional who had heard many shocking confessions over the years, later admitted that Ada's story had left him unable to sleep for several nights. The trial became a media sensation. News crews from across Nigeria and even international outlets covered the proceedings. The courtroom was packed every day with journalists, victims seeking justice, and curious onlookers who wanted to witness the downfall of the woman who had become known as the evil makeup artist. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including the laboratory reports, testimonies from dozens of victims, and eventually, Ada's own confession. The victims' testimonies were heartbreaking. Women took the stand one after another, many wearing headscarves or masks to hide their disfigured faces, and described how their lives had been destroyed. Amaka testified that she had lost her job as a customer service representative because her appearance frightened clients. A young woman named Blessing shared that her wedding had been called off after her fiancé's family saw her deteriorating face and convinced him that she was cursed. A successful businesswoman named Funmi explained that she had become a recluse, too ashamed to leave her house, watching her once thriving catering business collapse as her face rotted away. The medical experts who testified explained that the damage to these women's faces was likely permanent. While aggressive treatment with antibiotics and antiparasitics could kill the bacteria and parasites, the tissue damage that had already occurred could not be fully reversed. Most of the victims would require extensive plastic surgery and skin grafts, procedures that would cost millions of naira and take years to complete. Some damage, particularly the deep scarring and loss of tissue in severe cases, might never be completely repaired. The defense attempted to argue that Ada had been deceived by Baba Augun, that she had not known the full consequences of the ritual, and that she herself was a victim of manipulation. But this argument fell flat in the face of the evidence. Ada had known she was using human feces on her clients' faces. She had known this was dangerous and disgusting, yet she had done it anyway, morning after morning, client after client, for months. The pursuit of fame and fortune did not excuse such calculated cruelty. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Justice Okonkwo, delivered a verdict that shocked no one. Ada was found guilty on all counts. During sentencing, Justice Okonkwo spoke about the profound betrayal Ada had committed. She noted that makeup artists were trusted with something precious, with women's self-esteem and their desire to feel beautiful. Ada had weaponized that trust, turning what should have been a service of care into an act of violation. Justice Okonkwo sentenced Ada to 25 years in prison, the maximum allowed under the charges, with no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. But the story did not end there. NAFDAC launched a full investigation into Baba Augun, tracking him down through Ada's testimony and witness accounts. When authorities raided his compound near Badagry, they found evidence of numerous similar rituals performed for desperate clients across various professions. Baba Augun was arrested and charged with multiple crimes related to endangering public health and practicing medicine without a license. His compound was demolished, and the courts eventually sentenced him to 30 years in prison. The victims, meanwhile, formed a support group they called Beautiful Again, dedicated to helping each other cope with both the physical and emotional scars from their experience. They pooled resources to help members afford medical treatments. They advocated for better regulation of the beauty industry in Nigeria, pushing for mandatory licensing requirements and regular health inspections of makeup studios. Their advocacy led to new laws requiring makeup artists to register with health authorities and to use only approved products from verified sources. Ngozi, the successful makeup artist whose thriving business had once inspired Ada's jealousy, became an unexpected ally to the victims. She offered free makeup services to help survivors cover their scars as they healed, using proper techniques and products. She also became a vocal advocate for ethical practices in the beauty industry, speaking at conferences and training sessions about the importance of integrity and proper hygiene. As for Ada, prison became a place of profound reflection. Cut off from the world she had tried so desperately to conquer, she had nothing to do but confront what she had done. The other inmates, when they learned about her crimes, treated her with disgust. Even in a place filled with people who had committed serious offenses, what Ada had done was considered uniquely vile. She spent her days in isolation, both imposed by prison officials for her safety and self-chosen out of shame. In her cell, Ada wrote letters to her victims, though few would ever read them and none would respond. In those letters, she tried to explain her desperation, though she knew no explanation could justify her actions. She wrote about the pressure of failure, about watching her dreams crumble, about the terrible moment when she had chosen success over humanity. She acknowledged that she deserved every day of her sentence and more, that no punishment could truly balance the suffering she had caused. The story of Ada's glam studio became a cautionary tale that spread far beyond Lagos, beyond Nigeria. Beauty bloggers across Africa and around the world discussed it, warning their followers about the dangers of unregulated beauty services. Medical journals published case studies about the unique parasitic infection pattern that had emerged from the scandal. Psychology professors used the case in ethics classes to explore how desperation and ambition can corrupt moral judgment. Years later, some of the victims had managed to rebuild their lives. Through surgeries, treatments, and sheer determination, a few had recovered much of their appearance, though they would carry scars both visible and invisible forever. Others continued to struggle, their faces permanently marked by the consequences of trusting the wrong person at the wrong time. But all of them shared a hard-won wisdom about the price of vanity, about the importance of knowing exactly what is being put on one's body, and about the need to question things that seem too good to be true. The empty shop that had once been Kyoma's glam studio stood as a physical reminder of the scandal. For months, no one would rent the space, as if the walls themselves were contaminated by what had occurred there. Eventually, a new business moved in, a legitimate salon run by a licensed cosmetologist who made transparency and safety her highest priorities. But even years later, older residents of the neighborhood would point to that location and tell newcomers the story of the makeup artist who had been so desperate for success that she had poisoned dozens of women with her own waste, all in pursuit of fame and fortune that ultimately cost her everything. And in prison, Ada would sometimes wake from nightmares in which the faces of her victims surrounded her, their skin rotting, their eyes accusing, asking the question she could never adequately answer. How could you do this to us? How could you smile while you poisoned us? In those dark moments, she understood that her 15 or 25-year sentence was nothing compared to the lifetime sentences she had imposed on the women who had trusted her with their faces, their self-esteem, and their dreams of beauty.